Spain looks like a success story. Nearly 100 million tourists every year. Beaches full, hotels booked, GDP growing faster than almost every country in Europe. But here's the question no one wants to ask. If tourism is making Spain richer, why are Spaniards getting poorer? Why are nurses sleeping in vans, teachers moving every 6 months, and workers commuting hours just to afford rent in their own cities? Why do Spain's most famous neighborhoods feel full of people, but empty of life? Because behind the sunshine, sangria, and postcards, Spain has built an economy that only works as long as tourists keep coming. And the moment they stop, everything cracks. This isn't just a story about tourism. It's a warning about what happens when an entire country sells its future for short-term growth. Stay with me, because once you see what's really happening in Spain, you'll never look at booming tourism the same way again. Spain welcomes nearly 100 million tourists every year, more than double its own population. Tourism pumps billions into the economy, making up 15.6% of GDP and supporting 3 million jobs. On paper, it looks like a dream model built on sun, beaches, visitors, and endless growth. But while tourists fill the streets, locals are being pushed out of the places they call home. The most visited cities in Spain are becoming unlivable for the very people who built them. So how did Spain's most successful industry turn into its biggest trap? Today, we're going to uncover how tourism ruined Spain's economy. Spain is currently the fastest-growing major economy in Europe. Last year, Spain's GDP jumped 3.2%, while the rest of the EU barely passed 1% on average. To put that in perspective, Spain alone generated around 40% of all Eurozone growth, a huge achievement for a country still recovering from the 2008 crisis. Turn on the TV and you'll hear the same headline every time. Tourism is booming. Beaches are full, hotels are booked, and iconic streets like La Ramblas in Barcelona look more like airport terminals than neighborhoods. But there's a hidden catch. Behind all that champagne and sunshine, Spain's economy has developed a dangerous dependency. Over 15% of Spain's GDP now comes from tourism alone. Some regions depend on it for more than a quarter of their economy. When Spain wakes up in the morning, its financial stability depends on millions of people hitting that book trip button. More than 3 million Spanish workers rely directly on tourism, including waiters, hotel workers, cleaners, souvenir vendors, and taxi drivers. And indirectly, it's millions more. One bad year for travel means millions of families suddenly struggle to pay the rent. Now imagine that, an entire nation relying on a sector that collapses if there's a storm, if flights get canceled, or if the world faces a pandemic, as we all learned in 2020. It's like building a skyscraper on sand. Looks great until the tide rolls in. Economists even have a brutal saying, no country has ever become rich from tourism alone. Why so harsh? Because tourism is what experts call a low productivity sector. You only earn more money if more humans work more hours. There's no path to meaningfully increasing wages or innovation. A hotel doesn't suddenly double its productivity the way a semiconductor factory can. High-value economies, Germany, Japan, South Korea, generate wealth through manufacturing, technology, and advanced services. These industries grow even when the number of workers doesn't. That's how wages rise. That's how nations get rich. Spain used to have strong industrial muscles too, shipbuilding, cars, machinery, but when tourism became the easy moneymaker, the beaches and resorts expanded, while factories shrank or moved abroad. And when so much money flows in from tourists, cities stopped serving their own people. Homes become Airbnbs instead of apartments for families. Markets turn into souvenir stands. Infrastructure is built for visitors, not residents. The city feels alive until you look closely and realize locals have been forced out. Because here's the frightening truth. If tourism gets the flu, Spain ends up in hospital. CO pulled the plug on tourism overnight, and Spain's economy crashed harder than almost any other country in Europe. So yes, Spain is growing faster than France, faster than Germany, faster than nearly everyone, but it is sprinting on a tightrope. One slip, a recession, a new travel rule, a heat wave, and Spain's entire economic model is at risk. Tourism made Spain strong, but it also made Spain vulnerable. And this economic success story may actually be the beginning of a much bigger problem, one that Spain isn't ready to face. To understand why tourism dominates Spain today, we have to rewind the clock back to a country that looked nothing like the Spain we see in the postcards today. After World War II, Spain was poor, isolated, and heavily rural. Towns, farms, villages, everywhere you looked, life was tough. But between the 1950s and 1970s, everything changed. Millions of Spaniards left the countryside and rushed into cities for factory jobs. This urban boom also triggered another transformation, a jump in home ownership. In the 1950s, only around 45% of Spanish families owned a home. By the late 1970s, that number had climbed to 70%. People were finally earning enough to buy apartments in Madrid, Barcelona, Valencia, and especially along the sunny coasts. The idea of the Mediterranean lifestyle, beaches, cheap wine, and sunshine, became a national symbol of progress. Then came the moment that changed everything. 1992 and the Barcelona Olympics. Barcelona went from an industrial, polluted port to a global brand overnight. New beaches, a modern skyline, flashy stadiums, and culture. Spain sold the world the dream, the land of vacations, and the world bought it. Tourism skyrocketed. International arrivals exploded. Costa del Sol, Mallorca, the Canary Islands, and suddenly Spain wasn't just a country, it was Europe's getaway. As tourism and services grew, manufacturing began to shrink. The government looked at the numbers and thought, why spend decades building factories when tourists bring cash instantly? Factories closed, workers shifted to hotels, bars, and construction, productivity went down, but employment looked great on paper. This was the first step towards Spain's dangerous dependency. Then came the perfect storm, the early 2000s. Cheap credit flooded Europe. Banks handed out mortgages like candy. Housing projects exploded everywhere, especially in coastal provinces already shaped by tourism. Economists call this era growth on steroids. GDP rising, jobs rising, wages rising, Spain looked unstoppable. But that growth wasn't powered by innovation or new industries. It was powered by bricks, hotels, and sunbeds. Imagine a country building a giant economic engine, but all the parts only work when tourists show up. And when you put tourism and construction together, everything looks fantastic until the cycle ends. And in 2008, it ended. The housing bubble burst, construction collapsed, millions lost their jobs almost overnight. And what was left standing? Well, not much, except the beaches. Tourism wasn't just a piece of the economy anymore, it had become the economy. Because every year that Spain relied more on tourism, it relied less on innovation, technology, and industry. Of course, jobs came back, but not the same kind. Instead of stable factory salaries, many had to settle for low-paid service jobs in hotels and bars. Instead of exports boosting national wealth, tourists drinking mojitos boosted seasonal revenue. Spain recovered from the crisis, but with an economy even more fragile than before. And from this point onward, Spain was a brand and a vacation product. Now that we understand how tourism became Spain's economic backbone, we can talk more about the present. Because today, the conflict is no longer in the hotels or on the beaches, it's in people's homes. Tourists need a place to sleep, right? But locals need a place to live. And in Spain, those two simple demands have crashed into each other. Tourism is exploding like never before, and because of that, the housing supply is completely broken. For decades, Spain has built properties as investments, places designed to sit empty and gain value, not to house families. And the result is shocking. Around 14% of all homes in Spain are empty. That's roughly 3.8 million homes, enough to give every homeless or struggling family a place to live several times over. And yet, people still can't find affordable rent. Imagine a lifeguard in Barcelona. They keep tourists safe on the beach, but at night they commute 2 hours home because they can't afford to live near that same beach. Over the last decade, salaries barely moved, but on the other hand, rent nearly doubled in major cities. So yes, tourists bring money, and money attracts investors, and investors don't buy homes to live in, but to turn them into seats for tourists. So you end up with neighborhoods where the souvenir shop replaced the bakery, the Airbnb key box replaced the mailbox, and luggage replaced locals. In Barcelona's Gothic quarter, many residents say they don't recognize a single neighbor anymore. The same is happening in central Madrid. It's turning into a theme park of tapas. Fun to visit, yes, but near impossible to live in. Spain is now witnessing protests unlike anything seen in its tourism history. After creating one of the world's most successful tourism machines, the machine is now eating the very people who built it. And the question is no longer, can Spain attract more tourists? It's, can Spaniards still afford to live in Spain? Let's comment on the salaries now, because this is where the real economic tension becomes impossible to ignore. Spain has become a global tourism magnet, but the jobs that come with the success tell a very different story. Tourism is a low-productivity sector. That means workers create less value per hour compared to industries like technology or manufacturing, and low productivity almost always equals low wages. The average salary in tourist sector sits around 1,100 euros per month. That's barely enough to survive. Now, let's compare that to the cost of living. In cities like Barcelona or Madrid, a normal life, rent, food, transportation, and utilities can easily pass 2,000 euros per month. Imagine working full-time serving tourists who drink 14 cocktails when you can't even afford your own city. That's the daily reality for hundreds of thousands of Spaniards. So what do people do? They compromise. They move far away from the center, sometimes hours from their workplace, squeezed into tiny apartments with roommates. On top of the low pay, tourism jobs are often seasonal and unstable. A waiter might work 8 months, then spend 4 months begging for shifts. A hotel cleaner may never sign a permanent contract. A beach bar worker might be dismissed as soon as September hits. Let's put this into perspective. How do you build a future on temporary work? How do you plan a family when your income disappears every winter? Spain's birth rate has collapsed to 1.3 children per woman, which is one of the lowest in the entire world. When people can't afford to rent, they wait to have children or never have them at all. But here's the most painful part. While workers struggle, somebody else is getting rich. The tourism economy sends wealth upwards to property owners, global hotel chains, cruise companies, and international investors. Think about it. The person who cleans hotel rooms sees 1,100 euros a month. The landlord who rents out 10 apartments for tourists sees 10,000 euros a week in the summer. And that creates two different Spains living side by side. One is a playground for visitors, the other is a survival game for locals. Workers are essential for keeping the country running, but they are not rewarded for the prosperity they help generate. So yes, tourism brings money, but who gets it? Not the workers who power the industry, not the young people trying to start their lives, not the families forced out of their own neighborhoods. Spain has built an economy that makes visitors feel rich, while far too many citizens feel poor in their own country. And that brings us to an uncomfortable but necessary question. What happens when the people who live here can no longer afford to? Because the moment locals leave, the soul of Spain leaves with them, right? If low wages and high prices hurt daily life, the next consequence is something deeper. Spain is losing its identity. Imagine a city where every shop becomes a souvenir stand, where bars no longer know the names of their customers, where your neighbor isn't someone who waves hola every morning, but rolling a suitcase passing through for 48 hours. That's what locals mean when they say, our city is becoming a theme park. Tourist neighborhoods feel full, but also empty. Full of people, but empty of community. And trust me, nobody wakes up wanting you to yell at tourists. People do it because they feel pushed out of their own home. Let's look at what this looks like up close. In Ibiza, a paradise sold to the world as luxury, the workers who keep it alive face the opposite reality. Nurses, crucial workers need to care for tourists, are forced to live in vans and campgrounds because rent takes their entire salary. Barcelona has its own version of the same story. Teachers, respected, educated professionals, have to move every 6 months. Why? Because their landlords kick them out for the summer when tourists pay more.
Can you believe it? Think about that.
How do you build a community when the people who teach your children don't know where they'll sleep next year? Ibiza is home to one of the planet's oldest ecosystems, a 100,000-year-old seagrass called Posidonia. It creates clear turquoise water, protects beaches from erosion, and supports marine life. But the explosion of yachts, symbol of premium tourism, tears it up every time they drop an anchor. A natural wonder that took thousands of years to grow can be destroyed in seconds. And here's the irony. Tourists come for beauty and culture, but overcrowding destroys exactly what they came for. Which brings us to the harshest critique from economists. Spain risks becoming a country of unskilled landowners and servants. Spain understands the crisis it's facing, and finally the alarms are ringing in government offices. Politicians see exactly what we've been talking about. Rents exploding, workers displaced, neighborhoods disappearing. So the question is, can Spain escape the tourism trap it built for itself? Let's start with what they're already trying. The government has been cracking down on short-term rentals, especially in the hotspots like Barcelona, Madrid, and the Balearic Islands. Officials are removing illegal Airbnb listings and limiting the number of homes that can be converted into tourist apartments. It's a necessary move because right now, housing is treated less like shelter and more like a business. Cities are also investing in public housing, trying to give local families a chance to stay close to their jobs, schools, and community. But as every Spanish renter knows, supply hasn't caught up to reality. Spain has a deficit of 450,000 homes, and every day that gap grows. Tourism regulation doesn't stop at housing. Barcelona, for example, wants to limit the number of cruisers entering the city. Cruise ships bring millions of people and spend almost nothing compared to hotel tourists. Other measures include higher tourist taxes, restricting hotel development, and trying to move tourism away from overcrowded city centers and towards less visited regions. These decisions show one thing clear. Spain already knows how bad the situation has become, but reforms have been too slow, and the damage is already too deep in many places. Think of it this way. Tourism has been the engine of Spain's economy for decades. You can't just take the keys out of the ignition overnight. If Spain clamps down too hard, too fast, millions could lose their jobs. If it does nothing, millions more will be priced out of their homes. This is Spain's economic tightrope. So what's the real solution? In the long run, Spain needs new engines of prosperity. Industries that don't depend on weather, tourist seasons, or cheap labor. Sectors that generate real value, high productivity, and better wages. That means expanding its growing technology scene, where Spanish startups are beginning to attract international investment, or accelerating the shift towards advanced manufacturing and green energy, sectors where Spain already has a strong foundation thanks to its skilled workforce and one of Europe's largest renewable energy networks. It also means investing in research and innovation, so the country isn't just serving the global economy, but actively shaping it. In short, Spain must move from selling sunbeds and sangria to building the future. Spain could become a leader in fields like electric vehicles or clean hydrogen, but those industries take time, and time is the one thing that Spain doesn't have much of. Tourism is still accelerating at record speed. More airline passengers arrive every year, more new hotels rise along the coast, and more apartments are converted into short-term rentals. With each wave of visitors, the pressure on wages, housing, and daily life grows heavier. So we're left with a single, unavoidable question. Can Spain diversify its economy fast enough before the tourism traps fully snap shut? Because at the end of the day, Spain must choose what kind of country it wants to be. Will it become a nation that creates wealth through innovation, productivity, and strong industries? Or will it remain one that simply serves it one holiday season at a time? If tourism keeps growing faster than real opportunity, who will still be able to call Spain home?